Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Alok Ranjan. I'm the Director of Programs and Investments at the Power of Nutrition. Welcome to this Fireside Chat with dear colleague Abby. Abby is from World Bank. I'll later on invite her to introduce herself and her journey. So for this Fireside Chat, it provides an immense pleasure for us to invite one of our key partner through this 10-year of journey, through different roles that she has been with different organizations. And now she is heading the nutrition work at the World Bank. So let me invite Abby to introduce herself. Abby.
Thanks so much, Alok. Yes, I'm Abby Perry, and I'm now the Global Program Lead for Nutrition with the World Bank. It's actually a real delight to have the opportunity to talk about the power of nutrition today. My journey with the power of nutrition has been probably as long as power of nutrition has been in existence, as I was formerly head of nutrition with DFID, as you noted, one of the founding partners for the power of nutrition. And have been very inspired and excited at seeing the power of nutrition progress along these many years. So I'm very happy to be able to speak with you today.
Thanks, Abby. Thanks for joining us for this conversation. We, as a Power of Nutrition, are just 10 years old at this point of time. And I would say it's been amazing partnering with the World Bank, especially across the 8 countries that we have partnered right now. Whenever we talk about our portfolio, we always say the lion's share of our partnership in terms of the number, in terms of the reach, as well as the financial leverage, is what the partnership with the World Bank brings. And it provides us a model of connecting the grant financing with the concessional loan at the same point of time, with the government being part of that whole engagement. If I can just capture something that was said by FCDO in their project completion report, they said the Power of Nutrition has built a strong relationship and model for working with the World Bank and contributed to the increased prioritization of nutrition within the World Bank's portfolio of investments as well. From there, if I can take you just 2 weeks before, when we were all at Nutrition for Growth Summit, that entire week in Paris, what are your key reflections from that summit, Abby?
I think the first thing that was most striking about the summit, and I've been involved in different iterations over the years with Nutrition for Growth since the first 2013 summit that the UK government hosted. I think the biggest reflection I had was just the degree of commitment and leadership and enthusiasm that came from governments that are dealing with some of the most challenging issues when it comes to malnutrition. We had extraordinary participation from Nigeria, from Ethiopia, from Cote d'Ivoire, from Indonesia, from many more. And I think that, as a feature of the summit, was probably the most inspiring thing. The sense that you've got governments who are understanding the importance of the issue and who are frankly willing to step forward and try and tackle this issue in a very complex way. We talk a lot in nutrition about multi-sector solutions. But from a government perspective, having worked for a government myself, approaching anything multi-sectorally, working across line ministries is immensely complicated. So just to see that level of commitment, recognition of the importance of the problem, but also a willingness to operate in a very complex way it was a genuinely inspiring and motivating feature of the summit.
And since the summit was at a time when the whole global financing scenario is undergoing a lot of change, and especially the nutrition financing is evolving, and we saw the 28 billion plus commitment that came through different funding partners. Your reflection on the current global financing, especially in context of nutrition?
I think it's quite a complex story. I think, as you note, at the end of the summit, the amount that had been pledged was actually the same as the amount that had been pledged at the end of the Tokyo summit in 2021, which I think generally was felt to be a very successful summit, noting obviously in the context of COVID. We also had some concerns about the kind of fiscal space and the ability for donors to step forward at that time. I think obviously there are some very headline perspectives when it comes to the state of nutrition finance. We know that some of the larger traditional donors are reducing or stepping back from the support that they have originally or historically provided. And that's not only in the space of the more direct nutrition support, so the funding that gets coded as nutrition within the OECD DAC, but also in terms of the kind of broader investments across health, across humanitarian, which are also really part and parcel of trying to alleviate challenges with malnutrition. And I think there's no getting around that. I think the other feature that is clear is there are many, many, many pressures coming into governments when it comes to the issues that are on their agenda. We're spanning everything from, trying to look at, transforming the energy sector through to job creation, through to, commitments in areas like education and school meals. And governments have got a lot of different choices and a lot of different challenges to deal with. So on the one hand, I think that the global financing picture despite that 28 billion pledged, still remains a very concerning scenario, I think, in terms of what this looks like for nutrition moving forward. There is, however, I think another part of this story which is less clear, and that's about all of the other financing that is in what we call nutrition sensitive programming, or indirect programming. The financing that cuts across the different sectors like agriculture and so on. A lot of what's in that 28 billion comes from investments across different sectors that we hope will help to improve nutrition outcomes. But I think on that, we simply don't have a lot of understanding actually of what that money is and what that money isn't. We know that it's been very difficult at times to ensure that what we count as nutrition sensitive financing is actually the type of financing for the type of activities that will sustainably address nutrition issues. So I think we have a little bit of a mystery, in fact, also about the state of nutrition financing, because for sure the nutrition specific funding, the more direct funding, is key. But I think we all recognise in the space of multi-sectoral action that we also need those investments to work across other spaces. But at the moment, we just don't know. We don't know what that story looks like in real terms. Different actors use different methodologies to determine that spend. And I think that's something we're going to have to dig into a little bit more over the coming months.
Yeah, it's an important aspect you're calling out, Abby, over there, and our own partnership with the World Bank, where we sort of brought in pooling resources across bilateral funding, high net worth individual funding, philanthropic funding to partner with the 8 World Bank programs that we're talking about. And that 114 million that we brought in worked beautifully with the 374 million of the concessional loan across these 8 countries that help leverage nutrition. And what it showed us over last decade is there could be ways of bringing different sort of funding, what you're calling out right now, that we have to look at funding not just from one aspect, but different aspect, different sectors, different type of players. So it'll be great to hear your reflections in terms of role that the different set of stakeholders can play. We know there is domestic resource allocation. You called out different countries coming and sharing their plan, vision, and all. I was really impressed looking at the Ethiopia talking about the Sokoto Declaration and their journey for last 4 years and their vision for the upcoming 4 years. And we're really excited about that because we have supported 4 investments in Ethiopia over the last 1 decade: World Bank partnership, UNICEF partnership, then a partnership with EPHI, Ethiopia Public Health Institution, and a humanitarian link to work with IMC. So it's different ways where different partnerships could be done. So in reflections from your side in terms of how can you bring the priority around domestic resource allocation, around the concessional loan, the grant funding, and how technical assistance could be provided to the country-led prioritization of the nutrition programs, and especially you called out the multi-sectoral as well. So how can we make all this come together?
So I think one of the starting points for this still has to come back to the idea of us singing from the same song sheet when it comes to the investment case, the opportunity. What is it that you can invest in to deliver impact? There's a lot of things we don't know, but there are still at the same time quite a lot of areas where we have a good understanding of what works. This is reflected in the investment framework that the World Bank published at the end of 2024. It provides a good kind of pretty thorough basis for saying these are the kind of impactful interventions, invest in these areas and you will deliver concrete impacts. We do have to go beyond that framing because there are things, as I said, that we don't know. So I think one of the key starting points is that we do as a community need to be able to kind of use those sorts of tools and be on the same page and sing from the same song sheet as much as possible. But I think the second most important part of this is for governments to be properly in the lead. We say that a lot, but actually I think that there are too many circumstances in which governments aren't. Ethiopia has been a really good example where they've got extraordinarily capable people, very committed, understand the sector, very engaged internationally, are learning from other countries, but also really trying to focus in on leading their own actions, as you said, through the Sokoto Declaration. And we need to be able to ensure that governments have trusted, neutral hands behind them, right? That who can actually help them navigate what I think is probably going to become an even more complex financing landscape before it becomes a less complex financing landscape. And I think at times that doesn't really happen in that way. I think that one of the powers of the power of nutrition is being able to kind of go in really as a broker with limited skin in the game, for want of a better phrase. In that, being able to kind of work alongside the World Bank teams or UNICEF, but with fundamentally the government's priorities front and centre. That's all working in support of what the government is trying to do, and that doesn't always happen. We know that there are many parts of the system that come in with a particular priority, a particular agenda. This has been a feature of nutrition for a long, long time. The Lancet series in 2008, which kind of kick-started a lot of the current focus on returns on investment, the idea that we can actually have evidence-based solutions. That series culminated in a fifth paper which described us as fragmented and dysfunctional as a community. And I think we've got to kind of hold on to the fact that we've needed to take very proactive steps to try and deal with that. So we have mechanisms like the Scaling Up Nutrition movement, which are meant to hold us all, because we are all part of the Scaling Up Nutrition movement, that are meant to hold us all accountable for stepping forward and in effect putting the leadership of governments first and working in support of that in a way which is about what governments are trying to deliver, not fundamentally what our own individual agendas are. And that's difficult, but I think we need to do more of that. And I would say we need to do more of that because, as you rightly describe, the financing landscape is quite complex. It always was, but is probably going to be more so where we have very generous philanthropies who are rightly wanting to try and push forward on specific aspects of the nutrition agenda. We have all of the other traditional types of financing, and then we have all the complexity of multi-sectoral, we have the complexity of humanitarian and development. And so I think kind of really being able to stand by the mechanisms that put governments in the leading position, that allow partners to come together around a clear plan and try and foster a sense of kind of collaboration and communication and transparency in what we're doing with resources is going to be key. I know you're referencing also this kind of interplay between the different types of financing. So the one reflection that I've had in my initial time in the World Bank, which many people who've looked at this kind of thing for a lot longer than I have, it is really clear that for concessional financing in particular, it's a much bigger deal for a government to take on. It's more complex. It's a much more complex setup to manage, and for any government. And there's also some inherent risks still when it comes to nutrition. It still feels not necessarily like the area that you would guarantee if you invest, you're going to see the return you hope. It's complex. And so I think that the combination of financing, and in effect, the model that Power of Nutrition was really working to, remains a really fundamental one, because there's a degree to which that model of bringing different financing sources together can help de-risk, can allow for some degree of creativity around doing impact evaluations, exploring different ways of doing things, innovating. And so I think that bringing those financing streams together is really important. But my one final thing to note on that, and you'll know very well, Alok, from the Power of Nutrition, a lot of the very early stages of the relationship between the Power of Nutrition and the World Bank came down to the kind of legalities and administrative setup. The World Bank, like any organisation, works in a very specific way. The other development banks are the same. So we need to be able to take the time when it comes to looking at how different financing comes together to also work out how to make it work within the setup and requirements of the institutions, all of whom have boards and that they need to report to, as well as client governments that they need to support. So it does require some time and investment, and I don't think it's going to happen naturally, which is why you having these kind of conversations and asking these questions, I think, is a really, really fundamental thing, so that we can capture the lessons from the power of nutrition that are not just about results achieved on the ground, but also about how to navigate this complexity of a financing landscape.
I'm so glad, Abby, you're sharing about all the processes that it took from both the sides to arrive at way of functioning, what we learned in the process, and it's been a journey. Initial few investments that were done were very health system focused. Slowly and steadily, we evolved towards what you're prioritizing as a multi-sectoral approach that everyone needs to have. Most of our recent investments with the World Bank partnership have been around multi-sectoral investments, the countries that you called out some examples. If you look at the Rwanda program, the partnerships that we had there, the Madagascar program, many of these have been driving different approaches around the multi-sectoral partnerships as well. But one aspect which really excites me is how we are looking at what we say 3S, the scale, systems approach, and sustainability. All the partnership across the 8 programs with the World Bank focuses on scale, system strengthening, and sustainability approaches early on. So your reflections in terms of why is it that we need multi-sectoral approaches and approaches which works on system strengthening, because that's not what many organizations end up doing. They have those in the policies, they talk about it in their policy documents, but when it comes to implementation, it doesn't many times end up being a multi-sectoral program designed or focused on the system strengthening approaches.
I think fundamentally there are a couple of reasons why the multi-sectoral and indeed the institutional strengthening or the system strengthening is so key. But I'm going to bring it back to the perspective and experience of a government. So a government that's trying to address an issue, that's made a commitment to its to the voting public, to the people it's there to support, that's made commitments to entities that it's accessing funding to. Governments are really trying to see change and results. And what we know very simply is you can counsel a mother very well on how she should nourish herself in pregnancy, that she should use the supplements that she's given, how she can feed her children. But if that mother doesn't have access to affordable foods to feed her children, or she goes to prepare food and she doesn't have access to clean water in her community, which means the kids are endlessly getting sick, we don't see impact. And ultimately what we're risking kind of oversimplifying, I don't want to describe it as oversimplifying, but oversimplifying the story, is a disillusionment, frankly, from governments. It's already quite a hard thing. We know that stunting reduction and indeed reducing other forms of malnutrition is not an overnight fix. It doesn't happen quickly. And that's already putting us on the back foot when it comes to political cycles. Governments who are in power for 4 or 5 years, who are trying to then get re-elected. Frankly, when they make a statement, including on stages in Paris, they are implicitly or explicitly committing to achieve something which actors in that country are then going to hold them accountable for. So I think the more that we really only look at it from the perspective of one sector, yes, of course, having an investment in a supplement or treating a child for severe wasting, that will deliver a result. I'm not questioning that at all. But I think when we're looking at it, at how a lot of governments are approaching this, that they're understanding they want to reduce stunting, they want to reduce wasting, they want to reduce the actual outcome itself. And that we know that doing that isn't as simple, and they need to be able to see results. So, and in fact, I actually feel that there are more governments who are stepping forward, as I said earlier, who are willing to try and navigate that complexity of multi-sectoral approaches. And therefore, I think it's incumbent on us to support them. On the system strengthening side of things, again, I think it's recognizing that history is littered with many examples of very well-meaning support, which when you go back a year later, there isn't anything happening anymore. And again, I think for us to be respectful to both the people who need to be free of malnutrition, but also for the governments who are taking, particularly in the case of concessional finance, they're making an investment, and the investment is not the same as a business investment. The investment is there to try to get them to a point where they don't need that sort of financing into the future, which means that if we're not supporting them to actually build the systems, to build the capacity, then all we're doing is leaving them in a position where 4 or 5 years down the line, they have to do exactly the same thing again. And it is feasible for us to do system strengthening, to look at the institutional capability. And so I think it has to be a part of every single thing that we do, even where there is a very specific priority that people have. And I know a number of the actors that are really driving forward some of the specific interventions, they're committed to that. And I think it's really important that we consistently translate that commitment into actual investments around the systems and around that question of impact at scale as much as possible.
Great to hear that whole push around the multi-sectoral as well as the system strengthening and the rationale that you provide in terms of how that is what is going to stick and deliver in the future as well, rather than reinventing the process again and again and again. You called out the country-led approaches, and the countries are adapting more of these sort of multi-sectoral and systems-based approaches. So there are a few examples. How can they be the exemplars that other countries starts learning more from and start replicating on their own? How could that model of so many others who are standing in line to become the exemplar, they can look at these exemplars and learn quickly rather than reinventing the entire process on their own?
So, I mean, I think there are a number of actors out there that are very committed to and interested in the idea of knowledge, learning, and exchange. And I think, given the kind of financing situation we're all in globally right now, we need to try and work out how to both consolidate some of those efforts so that as a community, we can start to work with governments that are wanting to learn or share both ways. And to really look at how to bring kind of some efficiency in the way that we're able to both capture their experiences and support that learning and sharing process. As I mentioned earlier, the Scaling Up Nutrition movement was established, with exactly this purpose in mind. And I think we really need to look at how to, again, coalesce around that kind of mechanism so that we're able to really enhance and enable that learning and sharing. But I think in addition to that, we do need to, I think, look much more closely at the question of how that learning and knowledge exchange works. One of the things that's been particularly exciting for me in my new role is that we have a dedicated knowledge and learning team within the health, nutrition and population unit that I'm part of. And they bring kind of state of the art global expertise in how you think about knowledge and learning. And nutritionists are amazing. We can go and find every single problem and come in and find a solution to that problem. But I think with things like this, we need to bring people in who actually can really approach this question of knowledge and learning from the perspective of what's going to deliver the most sustained impact and genuinely empower often very very pressured and busy government actors to be able to kind of own and learn and understand and feel empowered through those processes. So I think right now we've got a lot of good experiences. They're not often very accessible, and it often is quite difficult to use those in a way that can allow people to kind of genuinely learn and share. And it's one of the commitments that we've made as the World Bank Group as part of signing on to the FCDO Nutrition Integration Compact is to offer up a platform for that. I will be developing that thinking in very close collaboration with actors in the system, because, as I said, this is not about World Bank glory. It's about ensuring we can optimize how we use these experiences and resources to really equip governments to be more confident and able to navigate this complex story of nutrition. So watch this space. We'll be coming out for more conversations about how to take that forward.
Really looking forward to that. Towards the end of the session today, if I would invite you to share one call to action for the sector, what would that be?
I think it'll pick up on some of the things that I've reflected on. We need to put our own agendas to one side and work out how we can bring our best selves, our intellectual offerings, our investments, our norms, our standards, our guidance, and so on, in support of advising, informing, and enabling governments to take the lead. That is, for me, the most urgent call to action. At times that are difficult, we can either come together or there's a risk that we fall apart. And I think we really urgently need to come together. I think everybody has something to offer, but the only way we can work out how to do that in the spirit of enabling government empowerment, leadership, the system strengthening, and ultimately that sustained impact at scale, is if we put our offerings on the table and are willing to sit down and work out how to make that work. And again, I hope that there is that spirit I felt coming off the back of Nutrition for Growth, that there was a spirit of that in the air. And I think we're going to need to keep it up. I feel like let's not let the tough times divide us. Let's have the tough times bring us together, because the stakes are pretty high, and the results that we can achieve are very, very fundamental, given just how foundational good nutrition is to pretty much every aspect of being a human being, to be frank. So yeah, my call to action, let's come together and collaborate. It's key.
Yeah, that's great to hear, Abby, because similar to two things that you said earlier on, the fragmentation within the sector and singing from the same hymn book, I think when we bring both those things together, it very well aligns with your call to action as well. Any final thoughts for the power of nutrition as we're turning 10 years old?
Happy birthday. It's been a very fascinating journey. Very, very fascinating. And I'm very, very happy that you're taking this time to kind of learn and reflect on those experiences. I think it's really fundamental that we do learn and share from experiences like the power of nutrition. So happy birthday.
Thank you so much, Abby. This has been really a delight and wonderful conversation to have. Thank you so much.
Thank you.